Welcome to the 221st episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Thank you for listening. Well, in our practice and in drdulaney.com, if you haven't heard about it, we have the August birthday month challenge going on. It's going on really well. Several people are competing and everybody are logging their moving minutes. So it's when you're exercising to record your time. So we don't care what you do, whether it's swim, bike, run, dance, yoga, Pilates, karate, martial arts, Tai Chi. It's how many minutes you're actually doing something. And this weekend I did an 80-mile ride, for instance, and I spent some time changing a flat tire along the side, which I didn't count, and I also spent some time at a fire station waiting to see whether the thunder was going to let up or not, and was having a little nutrition. And we were talking to the firemen there, and it was an interesting conversation. I'll go on a tangent right up front. We started talking about what we eat and what we ride, and first things, our bike's really light. You know, the heaviest thing on the bike are us in the water, and what do you do for hydration and things? And I do grape juice with some maple syrup in it, about a cup of each, so it's about 370 calories for a 24-ounce bottle that I sip on along with water. So I carry two 24-ounce water bottles as well as that bottle. And I'm going to do that for race day as well. And then I have a bonk bar to eat along the way, and I have some bonk chews that I've been using. So all in all, pretty good. I may sneak in some mango, dried mango there since we have a ton of that. But that's pretty much what we do. But we were talking, and of course they were saying, oh, we're getting ready to eat breakfast, and we're going to have eggs and bacon. And it's like, well, you know, it's like your nice garage here. You're filling it up with metabolic waste, and you might be able to do that at 30, but it's going to get worse. And one of the firemen has a young baby, and it's like he has colic, and it's like, well, he wouldn't have colic if his mom, if he got rid of the dairy in her diet, colic would go away most likely, and you would get some extra sleep without doing much. So we talked about that, and then in walks the third fireman, who is the biggest, looks like a bodybuilder kind of guy, all, you know, big and burly, and he turns out he's a vegan. And he's like, we start talking about what he eats. His mom was vegetarian, and we were talking a little bit, and he said, yeah, and they said, well, you don't talk about it ever. And he said, well, yeah, you make fun of me when I talk about it at work. So it was pretty funny that a 57-year-old cardiologist on a bike had to come by so this giant guy could talk about what he eats at the fire station. But I told them that I'd come back and do a little talk. And I said, you know, if you get a grocery list, when I come back here next week on my ride, I can, you know, whip you up breakfast real quick, and y'all can eat that. So we had a good laugh and then went on our way. But anyway, circle all the way back to the exercise challenge is doing good. So keep posting your miles. If you can post a picture on my website, Jamila Dulaney MD on Facebook, love to see you doing your thing. Some people have, you know, emailed in that they had, you know, their Apple Watch is not cooperating. Your Apple Watch times minutes of activity with your heart rate. So if you're not getting your heart rate up, then it's not going to log that as exercise. And, you know, we said minutes of movement, and so we're kind of on the honor system for this this challenge. But, you know, one of the ways you can determine, you know, what kind of heart rate you should be having while you're exercising, if you just take this is a, you know, a rough estimate, but you do 220 minus your age, and then you do about 65 to 70% of that. That's kind of a zone 2 level heart rate, which is pretty good and pretty safe for most people. So for a 60-year-old person, that would be a heart rate of 112 to stay around, you know, so plus or minus 10 beats, you know, if you were 57, like I am, 114 plus or minus, you know, so that's easy pace activity that you're just trying to get your heart rate up. A 45-year-old would have to get to a heart rate of 122. So you're moving a little bit. You're starting to get a sweat on, especially if you're in these heat areas like Florida and Texas. My registered dietitian, Addie Dulaney Minor, is logging a temperature of 97 today for her group run. But, so your heart rate goes up easier when it's hot out, and it goes up when you're exercising. There are people that may be on beta blocker therapy, which will keep your heart rate from going up. And those people, if you can get to a heart rate that's, about 10, 15 beats higher than your baseline. So if somebody's on a beta blocker, their resting heart rate may be down around 60. So 85 or 90 would be a really good exertional heart rate for them. But again, this is at your own risk, at your own pace. So, feel like you're doing something and you're getting the sweat up. Make a few memories. We made some memories yesterday, Michael and I did, on the bicycle. Again, talking to the firemen and taking time out to change my tire. The funny thing that happened, we had been riding our road bikes up until a month or so ago. And before that, I hadn't really ridden off the trainer much on my tri bike. During the week, I ride the trainer I ride my tri bike on a trainer, which I take the back wheel off, and of course I'm not moving. And since the Ironman last year, I hadn't looked in my little tool bag that I carry on my bike and replaced my tube. So when I got a flat tire and I went to change my tube, 35 miles from the house, I didn't have a tube. And so Michael lent me a tube, but we have some rims that are pretty thick, and the tube stem length was just barely long enough, and we had 2 CO2 cartridges between us. So I had to be very, very careful in changing the tube and making sure that, when there's not a lot of the valve sticking out, you have to do it very carefully. And when I was in the race last year, I didn't do it carefully and wasted a couple tubes and ended up taking that tube out and putting in wasting a couple of CO2 cartridges and end up taking the short tube out and putting a longer tube in. So I guess I hadn't completely learned my lesson, but be sure that my little tool pack now is packed with the correct CO2 cartridges and inner tubes for next weekend. So lesson driven home. But when you're out on a bike 35 miles away and pretty much didn't have anybody to come and get us, we had to concentrate just a little bit. I was speaking with a new member today, and she's all excited about getting started, and she's worried. She does the cooking mainly for her family, so she has grown kids with grandkids, and she tries to be the cook and help out. Everybody else is working outside the home, and she's like, well, I'm going to have to, adjust my meals and their meals a little bit. I said, really? No, that's the last thing you want to do is you want to cook good food. You don't have to say this is plant-based. Nobody's going to ask you, hey, is there a tablespoon of olive oil in that stir fry? Nobody's going to ask you that. So you just put good food on the table and everybody will like it. I talked to her about carrot dogs and cowboy caviar, things from our cookbook. Again, if you haven't purchased your plant-based wellness cookbook, 3 Generations of Cooking, the Doctor, the Dietitian, and the Diva, get on over and do that. Cowboy caviar is in there. The pizza dough recipe that I put in there, I take little pieces of that and wrap it in carrots to make pigs in a blanket, great for kids. That will be a great school lunch if your kids are going back to school this week, to make little carrot dogs that they can take in their lunch. They're all wrapped up in the little breads that you make. It's very simple. And we talked about doing that and keeping it simple for her family. But she was worried that her daughter's a weightlifter and she wouldn't be getting enough protein. That her daughter said she needs a lot of protein because she's weightlifting. Now, I don't know what her daughter looks like, and I don't know how big a bodybuilder her daughter is. But if she's a 130-pound woman, that's 59 kilograms, and you need about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram. But if you round it up to 1 because, you want to put on muscle, you want to build and get bigger, that's about 59 grams of protein for her. And, that's still plenty. And the way I explained it is if you look at a 2,000 calorie diet and you do 10% of that 2,000 calories is protein, then that makes it 200 calories. And divide that by 4 calories per gram, and you end up with 50 grams of protein. So if you're trying to get bigger and grow in mass and size, because you're going to put on weight if you put on muscle. So if you want to put on weight, Then you add more calories to your diet. And if you add more calories at 10%, you're going to add more protein. So you never have to worry about the protein content on the plant-based diet. You're always getting it plenty. What you do want to worry about is getting enough carbohydrates to fuel you, which you will, 75 to 80%. And you want to get omega-3s to help heal and recovery. And you're going to get those through hemp seed, flaxseed, chia seed, pinto beans, or any kind of beans, and greens, especially kale. So those vegetables and antioxidants from fruits are much, much more important to worry about getting in than getting enough macronutrient protein. So don't worry about that. On the other hand, I saw a post from a chiropractor bragging about getting a t-shirt because he ate a 47-ounce steak at a restaurant. And I would guess he's probably in his 40s, maybe 30s. And so 47 ounces of steak would be about 16 servings of red meat. He's like, oh, well, that's one stupid human trick one evening, and I'm sure he felt bad and bloated and everything. If you look at that piece of steak, all 47 ounces of it, how many days that's going to go through his intestinal tract, how many days is that going to change his microbes? How many days is that going to be decaying in his intestine? How many days is that going to cause distension of his intestine and lead to diverticular disease? How many days is that going to increase the inflammatory markers that his microbes are emitting because of being exposed to that much red meat? How many grams of salt did he get that's toxic to his blood vessels directly? How much are his blood vessels dilated because of the volume expansion of keeping in all the water from the salt, trying to dilute that? So his blood pressure is going to be up. His inflammatory markers are going to be up for several days. Not to mention the metabolic waste that are being accumulated, knocked in, the iron loads that came with that 47 ounces, that'll be stored in his liver, potentially his brain, certainly his heart. That can take days to get out. The hormone load and the growth hormones associated with all this stuff, that's going to take days, weeks to get out. So it wasn't just a one bad meal that was cute, maybe for a younger person to pull off, but it's that metabolic waste accumulates. So if there is a little polyp starting to grow, we know that colon cancer is being detected in people less than 50 years of age. So now they're suggesting screening starting in the 40s, 45, because the incidence is occurring. We know that you have to have 1 billion cancer cells before you can get something about 1 centimeter in size. So you're really putting a lot of growth factors into something that if there's a bomb inside his colon ready to explode, this will certainly be enough growth potentiating factors to really cause a problem. So, one bad meal, especially to this magnitude, is not something that can easily be overlooked. Of course, the people in the picture were also overweight. And, it comes down to one of those, every misery loves company, and stuff yourself and it's cute. We're all overindulging because we can. We won this contest. I just think that, you really have to stop and think about, things like that. Same way with, going back to the woman and her grandkids. I said, if you really want to prevent breast cancer in your granddaughter, then you need to get into soy products. Her son, on the other hand, was thought that the estrogen, the phytoestrogens in soy would cause a problem in males and potentiate prostate cancer. So I explained that no, estrogen, the isoflavones in soy are the estrogen receptor blockers. So they're actually protective, especially in little girls. It's time to start the soy milk, 2 servings a day, early on in their age. So, better than get your calcium in cow's milk is get your soy and get your isoflavones. It should be what we should all be screaming. And you don't want them in soy sauce, and you don't want them in soybean oil that comes genetically modified and processed food. So you want good old-fashioned soy milk that comes from soybeans themselves, edamame or green soybeans, tempeh, fermented soybeans, tofu, coagulated soy milk. So get your soy that way. and get healthy and protect your family. And while we're still on the nutritional aspect of the podcast, and it's hurricane season in Florida, I'd like to talk a little bit about what you should have in your hurricane preparedness reservoirs, so to speak, pantry, your stores for the hurricane. I don't think it was last year, it was the year before last, we had about 14 days without power. And we have a couple generators that we hooked our refrigerators up to. I have a gas stove that I can cook with. A lot of people have grills. And being plant-based is actually beneficial when it comes to losing your power, because you don't have to worry about rotting meat, rotting fish, rotting chicken. Vegetables hold on a lot longer in the refrigerator. Just keeping vegetables in a cooler, so fresh vegetables are gonna last a week in a cooler. Soy milk comes in a box, so that will stay on the shelf and then can go in the cooler, little boxes at a time. Canned beans, so stock up on your low sodium to no salt added canned beans so that you have, 3 or 4 cans of each kind that you like: chickpeas, kidney beans, pinto beans, black beans. So make sure you have those available. The potatoes are another thing, so always make sure you have a bag of white potatoes and a bag of sweet potatoes. During the hurricane, again, I baked a bunch of potatoes, so we had those available. Then you can make, then you repurpose them. You can warm them up on the grill. You can make kind of cottage fries out of them by heating them up on the grill. You can make potato salad out of them. You can mix them with frozen vegetables and some tofu to make a tofu stir fry. If you have an Instant Pot and you have a generator, you can make a lot of meals in that. So that's a really good piece of equipment to have in the event of power loss if you have a generator. Certainly if you have a grill or a charcoal grill, you can do boil water and do a lot of those things on the grill as well. Even pasta. I remember during Hurricane Charlie, we gave away pasta and people didn't know what to do with it, but you can boil water on your grill and make pasta that way. Having a fair supply of frozen vegetables and frozen fruit. It's going to last for several days in the freezer, and you can use that to pack, in your cooler, and take the frozen vegetables and put in the cooler and use them as ice packs until you eat them, and keep the other ones in the freezer so you don't open the freezer. Always have plenty of water on hand, so you can buy some of the jugs of distilled water and have those and keep those in a dark, cool spot for when the power goes off. But it's really easy being plant-based. You can have boxes of tomato sauce that you can, put over the pasta or make with, and make a pasta primavera with. You can make baked beans with that. If you have the tubes of tomato paste and you have your dry goods as far as, little molasses and maple syrup, you can do baked beans. So there's a whole lot you can do in a hurricane situation. If you have, if your pantry's really well stocked. Quinoa cooks really quick. Boiling, rice takes a little bit longer, but certainly it can be done. If you know the hurricane's coming, you can do some of these ahead of time and, make yourself 3 or 4 days of rice and make yourself 3 or 4 days of beans. You can cook the beans from scratch and you have things ready to go, have the potatoes done. Here in Florida, we get a pretty good warning that something's coming, and you can still, if the hurricane doesn't, if you don't lose power, you can always use those things and repurpose them. So don't wait till the last minute to get your hurricane preparedness kit, food kit ready to go. And it also works if you're up north for the winter time. If you lose power, you also have that available to you as well. Same situation applies. It's a little bit easier if you have a fireplace and it's cold, harder to stay warm. So that's our only differences. So if we go on back to the exercise, I talked about getting your heart rate up. There was a study done and published recently in the Journal American Medical Association that looked at people that may have a genetic predisposition to obesity. And they looked at things like body mass index and percent body fat and waist circumference and hip circumference and the waist to hip ratio as markers of obesity and metabolic syndrome. And they wanted to know whether or not the genetic effects could be modified. And they looked at 18 different exercises. And it turns out that, they looked at things like mountain climbing and walking and exercise walking and dancing and longer yoga practicing, cycling, stretching, swimming, and dancing. None of them had the same effect at modifying obesity risk factors as jogging did. So going for a run, again, my favorite sport. Both feet are off the ground. You're pounding the ground at a higher force than your body weight. So you're generating bone. You're generating. You're using your muscles more. That tends to, increase your mitochondria, which increases your energy metabolism. And it was actually shown to be the best exercise. So if you have a family history of obesity, and you think you might have a genetic risk besides your dietary habits that are the same as your family, then I definitely throw jogging, easy running into the mix. It's a quick activity. You only need your tennis shoes, running shoes, and you can go out the door and you can go about anywhere. So it's a great exercise, and it takes the least amount of time. We're doing our August birthday month challenge, but you can get a lot of activity in or a nice run in 30-40 minutes. So it's a great way for the time consumed person to get a little bit more exercise in today. And with that, you need to be flexible here. And we're having some rainy season here in Florida. It's raining all times of the day. Usually it just rains in the afternoon, but we've been having rain throughout the day. So you don't get what you plan in sometimes, and you have to be a little bit creative. This morning I got sirened out of the pool because of lightning nearby, so I came back and took the dogs for a little run. So the other day I didn't get my swim in last Monday either, and so I did my bike training. I thought I'd be pressed for time on Saturday, so I did my long run on Thursday. So be flexible in your training too, which takes some of the pressure off. You know what you want to accomplish, and plan it out, but kind of have a backup plan. There's always time for weightlifting, and some in-place activities that you can do, whether it's to jogging to music or jumping rope or jumping up on a box, so you can keep moving and get a different kind of exercise in. There was also another study in Journal American Medical Association, the cardiology section, the guidelines for primary prevention of cardiovascular disease, looking at lifestyle and behavioral factors. And they suggested in the quotes, team-based care and a healthy diet, replace saturated fats with mono and polyunsaturated fats, and decrease dietary cholesterol ingestion. Just about anybody, I think, could write those if you want to decrease cardiovascular disease. It's interesting, team-based care. It's what we do in our office. A registered dietitian talks with everybody that she needs to or wants to have her speak with, or with anybody in our practice that would like to speak with a registered dietitian. And we encourage that, has access to her, which is Addie Dulaney Meinrich. If you'd like a consult with her, feel free to give us a call. We can. She and myself as well do private consultations without joining the practice, so that's available. Gretchen's not too happy this evening. And replacing saturated fat with mono and polyunsaturated fats. I think that when people look and you hear, you need some good fat. Well, most of the time they come packaged together. And, people talk about, well, I really love almonds. Well, almonds have omega-3 fatty acids, but they also have a lot more omega-6s. Coconut oil may have some monounsaturated, but it has a lot of saturated fat. So we want, we want people to get their omega-3s, and hemp seeds and chia seeds and flaxseed, but there's a little bit of fat in everything. Beans have some fat, tofu has some fat in it. So you'll just eat the right amount if you stay plant-based and not really worry about getting so much fat in your diet. And I think that, it's really watered down for people who don't know when they're replacing saturated fat with mono and polyunsaturated fats, because everything goes together. Peanut butter has saturated fat in it as well as polyunsaturated fat. So, what does that really mean as far as, if you want to spit it out, get rid of the animal products and you'll get rid of a lot of saturated fat. Get rid of processed foods and you'll get rid of trans fats. I think that should be the more direct message. But again, we try to water it down and make it politically correct so that nobody knows exactly what to do. Eat a healthy diet. Well, everybody that comes into my office says they're eating a healthy diet, yet they're in a cardiologist's office and they're overweight and they have diabetes and high blood pressure. So obviously they're not eating a healthy diet, or those things wouldn't be present. So people don't know what a healthy diet is, and all the boxes put healthy on the front, and they put, gluten-free and fat-free and all these other kinds, have lots of minerals, have high in fiber, and so people think those are healthy foods. People have said, well, I thought cashews were healthy foods. I thought they were good for you, and it's like, really not. Cashews have a lot of a lot of saturated fat, a lot of omega-6s in them. So, a raw diet heavy in nuts is not going to be the way to go either. They talk about getting exercise. And again, what is exercise? We know that they'll say now 150 minutes of exercise is the bare minimum. But, it's the bare minimum, not the maximum. So don't stop soon. I think people give up too early on what they're actually doing for exercise. So, move more than you sit and eat whole foods, mainly vegetables. And don't worry about getting good fats in. They'll take care of themselves. Nobody has, I've not seen anybody yet that, boy, it's like you're missing fat. And the other thing that I thought about the other day, I've had people come in, it's like, I think I need more fat. I just started eating a little olive oil because my skin was dry. And they're not getting enough fat. Well, if your skin is dry, it's hydration, it's not fat necessary. Or a need for fat. And I can prove that to you just by doing a little body lotion experiment, if you'd like. So if you take pure coconut oil or that's solid, or you can get the liquidized form, and you rub it on your skin, it really doesn't do much to moisten. It makes your skin greasy, but it doesn't make your skin necessarily softer. And it doesn't sink in. And if you look at a regular body lotion, it's a combination of water and fat and emulsifiers to hold the fat and the water together. Because the reality of it is, you need water for your skin to become moist. And so you're trying to get both of those things in there. If it's too watery, it just runs off. And if it's too oily, it doesn't sink in. So most of the time, it's really just a hydration thing that people's skin is dry or in an overexposure, perhaps, to the elements. But it's not a lack of oil. That really won't fix anybody. You see somebody's all greased up, and it's just the grease is just sitting on the outside. I want to talk a little bit about heart rate variability, because I'm going to talk a little bit about it every podcast. I'm measuring mine at rest to look over time at the training effects. And again, just to refresh people's memory from before, heart rate variability is a good thing. And it's from beat to beat. The time, if you look at electrical EKG, the QRS is the time from peak to peak is, and then variations of that and different ways to look at that shows your heart rate variability. And the more increased heart rate variability is actually a good thing. And it has, it ties directly to your autonomic nervous system. We have a sympathetic fight or flight part to our autonomic nervous system, as well as a parasympathetic calming, lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, anti-inflammatory. and depending on how we breathe can stimulate your sympathetic output or your parasympathetic output. So if you do the little experiment on yourself and you breathe really fast, in and out, in and out, and out, very shallow, you'll notice your heart rate goes up, and along with your respirations. And that will change. And if you start to slow down your breathing and take nice, calm, slow breaths, your heart rate will actually slow down. And a lot of that has to do with your vagal tone and your sympathetic tone. But the vagus nerve, or your parasympathetic output nerve, really connects mostly to the top part of your heart, the atria, where your sinus node is. And your sinus node is your baseline heart rhythm. Most people's sinus rhythm is someplace between 40 and, say, 80. And then the AV node is the junction between the top and the bottom chambers, and then there's the ventricle. So the vagal and parasympathetic nerves act mainly on the top part of the heart that sets the pace for the electrical activity. The sympathetic nerves affect both the atria and the ventricle. And so typically the sympathetic, if you increase your sympathetic tone, remember fight or flight, your heart rate goes up, the heart contraction goes up, the conduction of the electrical impulses goes up, and that's monitored by a couple different receptors, alpha and beta receptors in the heart. So, at rest and when you're active, you have both sympathetic and parasympathetic tone. And it depends on, where you are and your state of physical, your overall health. We know that people that are healthier tend to have more heart rate variability. As we age, heart rate variability starts to decline. Physical fitness, heart rate variability changes. But there's a very specific, you have your own heart rate variability, and it's very specific to you and your training and your state of fitness. And it differs between people that are not athletes, endurance athletes versus power athletes versus untrained people. There's a different response, and you can look at overtraining. If someone is overtrained and they're an elite athlete, their heart rate variability may change differently than somebody that's a sedentary person that's lost a couple nights' sleep. And it's thought as we age and our heart rate variability goes down, secondary to decreased parasympathetic or vagal tone and a decreased beta-adrenergic response. So it's not that our heart rate, we think about people as they get older, their heart rate goes down, but it's actually more as people get older, their heart rate doesn't change as much from beat to beat. Exercise actually improves that. And, breathing training improves that. So, what does that all mean? Again, heart rate, it comes back to being able to manage inflammation. We know that, inflammation impedes recovery. So athletes will do anything to decrease the inflammation in the body. So breathing and training, the more trained somebody is, the more they recover. But it also is going to apply to their breathing. If they have good parasympathetic tone or the ability to achieve that, then they're going to recover better. It turns out that athletes, for the most part, have higher parasympathetic tone. You would think that they have a more high when they train, they can get acute bouts of, or a burst of sympathetic predominance, but for the most part, that variability comes along the line of being able to slow down. So if you think about it, learning to be able to change gears. So the best sport car has more gears than the cheap little 3-speed. So that's really what you're ultimately trying to do through breath work and exercise, is to have more gears. And so getting back to our August Wellness Challenge, if you do everything at a very slow heart rate, you don't get as many gains in your heart rate variability as if you do some intense work. So mixing it up helps you to improve your heart rate variability, and pushing the pace helps to improve your heart rate variability. Again, you're changing gears. If you never change gears, your body's not used to actually achieving it. And the more you change gears, the more you'll tolerate changing gears. It's kind of funny how it all ties in. If you don't push yourself just a little bit more, your window is very, very narrow, both in a health standpoint, and a heart rate variability standpoint, and an overall gain standpoint. If you don't push yourself outside your comfort zone in your nutrition, you make fewer gains as far as recovering and getting off your medications. But using the heart rate variability, you can actually, there's actually studies showing improved performance by training according to what your heart rate variability is. So if you have a very hard session, the next day your heart rate variability might be down, your parasympathetic tone can even be up, and you might need an easier day. It does not mean to stay in bed and don't get out of bed and rest. It means that, that may not be the day for an intense workout. And so if somebody wants to get the biggest bang for their buck over time, watching their heart rate variability can help improve their performance by paying attention to that. Heart rate alone in the morning can be somewhat beneficial, but it responds a lot to the environment when you wake up. It responds to hydration as well. So it's not near as accurate. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite meals that I had over the weekend. I did a butternut squash curry. So I did a whole butternut squash, and I put it in my Instant Pot after I peeled it and baked it or boiled it for 8 minutes. It was soft. I drained the water off of that. I put it in my Vitamix blender, and I added 1 tomato and a Thai chili pepper. And I also added some garam masala, some turmeric, coriander, a little lime juice, garlic, ginger. And I forgot, I put a piece of coconut, frozen coconut, in the Instant Pot with my butternut squash. It was fresh coconut, so not even a fourth a cup of coconut. It's just one piece. And anyway, I blended all that up, and that was my sauce. And then I served that over broccolini, mushrooms, red peppers, yellow peppers, and carrots, and tofu, and topped it with cilantro. So that was a really, really good tasting dish. If you look at the nutritional facts on that, or the antioxidants, butternut squash, very high in beta carotene. The cilantro, nitric oxide, coriander, turmeric, garlic, ginger, a lot of antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, tomato lycopenes, the tofu, certainly going to get my protein from there, my beans, broccolini, a lot of nitric oxide producing nutrients, the mushrooms, anti-cancer properties, carrots, more beta carotene, my peppers, vitamin C, beta carotene. So this was a powerhouse of a dinner that we really enjoyed, and we put that over some rice, so some carbohydrate, calories, and fiber from that. So I really enjoyed that. There's a picture on Instagram if you want to see a picture of it, but that was a good dish. Today in nutrition class, we had a chocolate mousse with black beans and a Florida avocado and a little maple syrup, cacao powder. Served that with strawberries. One of the things I told people today is, maybe in the old days you had this big bowl of chocolate mousse topped with a couple strawberries if you go out to a restaurant. But we serve it with a big bowl of strawberries and top it with the chocolate mousse, so you get the chocolate taste of the mousse, and you get some protein from the black beans. But the main thing is you're getting the strawberries. You're getting a tremendous amount of vitamin C and phytonutrients and antioxidants from the strawberries. And then you're getting some antioxidants from cacao powder and some cacao nibs. But, for the most part, the sweet, heavy calorie stuff, we're using that as a small part, and we're using the low-calorie berries as the big part. So when you're doing your dessert, think about it that way. It was my birthday last week, and thank you all for the birthday wishes. Addie made me a chocolate cake. We had berries on top of the cake. Again, cacao powder, you don't need oil and eggs to make a chocolate cake. You can use oat flour if you want, or regular whole wheat flour works. You can cut way down on the the sugar, simple sugars by using maple syrup if you want to make somebody. So I had a chocolate cake that looked like a chocolate cake, but it was much healthier than the one you would buy in the store. So if you have a birthday or somebody that you know has a birthday, make them a cake. There's lots of good chocolate cake recipes out there, or any kind of cake recipes out there that don't require oil and don't require eggs. So celebrate somebody's birthday and help them stay healthy. So I hope you all have a good week. If you're going to go out and ride your bike, make sure you have spare tubes and cartridges so you won't get stranded. And but you can always stop in your local fire department and get some water and talk to your local firemen and tell them how great plant-based nutrition is. And until next time, get your exercise. Show me a picture of what you guys are doing on Facebook. I love to see it. Love meeting all you new faces. So thank you. Thanks for listening.